the Epoch Times has continued to report on and investigate for many scandals. And take a look at this. While the establishment media has been politicizing their coverage of the border crisis, the Epoch Times sent their reporters down to the border to actually go on ride-alongs with the sheriffs, speak with the border crossers, and bring the truth to all Americans. And take a look at this. While the mainstream media has been hostile to traditional values, we here at the Epoch Times have given tradition center stage and have given a platform for the wisdom, knowledge passed down in our cultures for thousands of years. So if you're looking for an awesome news source, click on that button below and try the Epoch Times for a month for just $1. And not only will you get all this, take a look at this. While the mainstream media has been normalizing both socialism and communism, the Epoch Times is reporting on the subversion of both America and the world by these two deadly ideologies. Take a look at this. While the establishment media has essentially been neglecting their coverage of China, we've been reporting on the real threat that the Chinese Communist Party poses to both America and our way of life. Take a look at this. Over the last 2.5 years, we've been reporting on the Trump administration honestly and without any false narratives. We give America a true picture of what the Trump administration is up to and why. And take a look at this. At a time when the mainstream media and these giant tech conglomerates are censoring American public discourse, we here have an awesome opinion section that gives a platform to truly unique perspectives. Take a look at this. We recently increased our font size by 20%, so it's easier on the eyes, easier to read, and awesome. Take a look at this. We have an absolutely awesome puzzle section. Every single week, our team of puzzle masters creates 2 full pages of puzzles. They're awesome, and they're going to keep your mind fresh and active. Take a look at this. The Epoch Times' health section focuses on holistic health, how you can improve your physical, mental, and emotional well-being to create a truly vibrant state of health. Take a look at this. Our team of food writers every single week puts together the food section filled with recipes that don't just look good on camera, but taste delicious in your home. The Epoch Times' travel section is truly unique because it doesn't focus on the nightlife and the club scene. It talks about the different histories and traditional cultures found around the world. It's like taking a trip while sitting on your couch. So if you're looking for a truly American traditional values, click on that button below and try the Epoch Times newspaper for a month for just $1. Real news delivered to your home that doesn't push any false narrative, doesn't spin the truth, and doesn't have any hidden agenda. We give you the fact. Just click on that button below.
Racist, offensive. That people have used to describe my shirt. In fact, the extremely tolerant young lady that called me a total fucking douchebag said that she wished I would die a slow and painful death. But none of that bothers me. What does bother me is when I see soy boy sissies and uninformed athletes or celebrities disrespecting our flag and our country.
As Christians and patriots, our beliefs are under attack daily. From out-of-touch celebrities poking fun at our faith, to spoiled athletes disrespecting our country by kneeling during the national anthem. Meanwhile, the free speech of American patriots is being demonized at every possible opportunity.
There's a war being waged on free speech, and the FPA is standing strong on the front lines in the face of enemies, both foreign and domestic. The Last Stand Tee is a perfect representation of our feelings on faith and country, and wearing the Last Stand Tee will designate you as one of the millions of Americans that refuse to back down from their beliefs. Join the 60,123 patriots. Well, what have we here? Thanks to Robert Jefferson from Uranus, Missouri, make that 60,124 patrons that have already purchased their Last Stand Tee. Click the link and get yours for just $1. Works for me. Here you go, Rosie. The only thing we need to make this incredible deal possible is for you to cover the cost of shipping. We're practically giving these shirts away. But don't worry, we're not feeling the burn all of a sudden. Quite the opposite. We're on a mission to grow our community of patriotic Americans to over 1 million strong. In order to do this, we cut out the middleman, and we're printing our shirts right here in America. Because we refuse to use cheap materials, quantities are limited for this Last Stand t-shirt offer. Give them the finger with your Last Stand t-shirt now for less than the cost of a cup of coffee. The Last Stand tee is a must-have for all patriotic Americans. And if you love watching atheist snowflakes melt down as much as I do, well, they hate this shirt. In fact, they hate it almost as much as when I go on pony patrol. It's tier 30 somewhere. So salty.
Mom, it was totally uncool. This guy wearing the American flag shirt, he was being so not right. He came and he spilled my entire cup of Joe. Fucking bald motherfucker.
Why was Mueller's testimony to Congress delayed? And why is it taking so long to declassify the documents related to the Spygate scandal? What is the significance of the recent John Hackett testimony in relation to the Clinton emails? And in the eyes of Judicial Watch's Tom Fitton, what key questions should Republicans be asking during Mueller's upcoming testimony? This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Today we sit down with Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, which uses FOIA, or Freedom of Information Act requests, and litigation to expose government corruption. We discuss the reaction to President Trump's tweets about the 4 congresswomen, the upcoming Mueller testimony, and what Tom Fitton sees as concurrent attacks on President Trump and his administration in the biggest corruption scandal of all time. We also look at the citizenship question and Tom's take on the different Spygate-related investigations, including those of DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz, U.S. Attorney for Connecticut John Durham, and U.S. Attorney for Utah John Huber. Tom Fitton, it's excellent to have you back on American Thought Leaders.
Hey, thank you. Good to be with you again.
So, I was hoping we would be talking about Mueller's testimony today. That was scheduled for today. What do you make of it being postponed again?
Well, the Democrats are trying to use the Mueller testimony to the greatest possible political benefit, which is to destroy the president. And they ran into a problem because they were trying to limit the questions, limit his testimony, and it just raised objections. Why are they changing the rules to prevent members from asking questions who serve on the committees he was going to be appearing before? And what was going on? And so, rather than deal with it directly, they didn't have time to deal with it directly, they delayed the testimony. Mueller is going to be problematic for the Democrats. Their goal, obviously, is to kind of raise the issues of collusion and obstruction, even though there's no evidence of either, by having Mueller suggest, well, the president's a bad guy and I couldn't exonerate him, which is right, contrary to the rule of law here in the United States, where you're innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
Under Mueller's rubric is you're guilty until I can exonerate you. Well, that's not the way it's supposed to work. That's why Democrats want him to appear. And Republicans are going to do their best to ask some tough questions to Mueller, and I hope they do. Why did you hire all these anti-Trumpers? What about your conflicts of interest? Why did you delete emails, your office delete emails, and not do anything in terms of trying to recover them? What happened there? All sorts of questions about Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. The Steele dossier, why did they use that fraudulent Steele dossier to target Trump? When did he know about the fact there was no collusion, and why did he tell the American people? President Mr. Mueller, in many ways, his office to use their authority to target President Trump. And like I said, he abuses the abuse led him to say things like, I can't exonerate the president from accusations of wrongdoing, suggesting the accusations of wrongdoing had a basis, which is, the Alice in Wonderland approach to law enforcement. And so, he needs to be held accountable for those abuses.
So speaking of the Steele dossier, there's been this, John Solomon's been reporting on this spreadsheet that the FBI had, basically looking at the various claims and finding that most of them were not verifiable early on. You're familiar with this.
Yeah.
So what is your thinking around this spreadsheet?
Well, there's a report out there by John Solomon suggesting the FBI tried to track down the various charge dossier and got nowhere quick, which isn't a surprise because they've been telling us the dossier, according to James Comey said, was salacious and unverified. They didn't tell the FISA courts that, so this document is another piece of the puzzle in terms of the fraud on the FISA court, where they used the Steele dossier to generate spy warrants targeting the Trump team. But again, this is all material that goes back before even Mueller was appointed. So if there's no Steele dossier, that's the whole fundamental basis of the Russia collusion. All this noise about Papadopoulos, that's just, it's after the fact excuses they're trying to come up with to justify, to distract us from the fact that the Steele dossier was the basis for the FISA spying. So it's just further confirmation the Steele dossier was built on sand. They knew it, and yet they used this as an excuse to spy on the President of the United States and to justify the appointment of a special counsel to try to put him in jail. Just a scandal that has no match in American history.
So, the president has actually ordered, quite a while ago now, declassification, or is authorized, said that we can have declassification on all sorts of documents related to this. It seems to have been going very slowly. There's been rumors that the DNI director, Dan Coates, might potentially be replaced. There's a lot of rumors going around. People are wondering, what about declassification? What are your thoughts on that?
It has been slow, and we've been pressing the Justice Department to declassify. Well, we've been suing in federal court for years on some of these deep state issues, including the FISA warrant applications, parts of which have only been released. Other parts, which evidently show more corruption, are still being withheld. So the Justice Department has been slow. My guess is there's a handful of people in the Justice Department appointed by President Trump, and they're deep staters. You can't do X, Y, and Z. So if I were the president, I would intervene directly in the sense that he has direct authority to release material. And if there's material out there in discrete categories of documents that we know about, for instance, the rest of the FISA warrant application, some of the memos associated with the creation of the special counsel investigation, what Bruce Orr was up to, the DOJ official, Bruce Orr was the DOJ official who was conflicted because his wife worked for the Clinton gang at Fusion GPS. That material, both Congress wants, Judicial Watch wants, the public interest obviously demands be released, and they should just authorize to release directly. Now, there may be other material that's a bit more complicated in terms of review and analysis. You can let the DOJ just continue the process however slow it is, but the White House should intervene to get these documents released.
Speaking of Bruce Orr, actually, he recently reported that he got a big promotion at an unlikely time.
This is the incredible thing. So he's working as a cutout for the FBI. So Christopher Steele was an FBI informant in 2016. We have the document. He was paid 11 of the 13 times he met with the FBI in 2016. So he's working for the Clintons, the DNC, and the FBI at the same time. So it was a joint operation. Then the FBI had enough of him because he was leaking. Because he wanted to get Trump, make him lose.
Okay.
So the FBI said, well, we can't work with him directly anymore. So what are we going to do? Well, we'll use DOJ's Bruce Orr to be our cutout. And Orr is conflicted because his wife, Nellie,
worked for and with Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele. So he gets a big bonus that year. I think it was $28,000, whatever the number was.
It's incredible, isn't
And then it comes out that he's working with Steele despite this conflict of interest. He's doing it on the slide. And the DOJ removes him, kicks him upstairs or downstairs or laterally, but takes him out of one of the top positions in the Justice Department. And in doing so, they give him a raise. So he gets caught in engaging in the least behavior that raises serious conflicts of interest concerns, right? Maybe even much more substantial issues. And he gets a raise. On top of the big barring his work for the Spygate operation targeting Trump.
While he's getting demoted.
Right, and this material that Judicial Watch is getting out, Congress didn't get out, but Judicial Watch did as a result of our litigation investigations.
No, it's amazing. And so there are a number of investigations still basically ongoing. We have the DOJ Inspector General, Michael Horowitz. He's been looking into this whole FISA abuse issue. Actually, he was interviewing Christopher Steele in London, from what we know. Where do you think this investigation is going? Where are we at with it?
Well, IGs are, he put out, for instance, the Inspector General, he's not a Trump appointee, he's an Obama appointee. And the last big IG report he did related to Trump and Clinton, there was a lot of big information that came out. We got out the text messages showing the bios of Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, highlighting the unusual activity by the FBI and DOJ and that sham investigation of Hillary Clinton's email conduct. But he just didn't want to reach the conclusions that any other person, given the evidence for them, would have reached. So he both pushed and pulled his punch at the same time. So I think we'll get a similar report here, where there'll be a lot of information that would be useful for those who want to prosecute someone, get some government reform or other accountability. But the IG is probably going to be not as aggressive as we would like. But it's important we get this information out, we get these details out. So the IG report will be both a cover-up and an expose at the same time. And we're going to focus on the expose part of it. And the reason Judicial Watch does the work we do because of the cover-up part of it. That's why we continue our 50-plus lawsuits on these issues.
So what about this other investigation into alleged, well, not alleged, the spying, the FBI surveillance that John Durham is doing now? Where do you think this investigation is going?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know publicly what's happening.
They've been very mum.
They've been quiet on it. Is there a grand jury operating? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. If there's a serious criminal investigation, I haven't seen indications of it. Maybe they're just doing a review and just using a grand jury to get a witness or two to talk to them. I don't know. But we're getting impatient. We want them to move, or at least reassure us that they are moving. It doesn't mean they have to indict someone tomorrow, but we want to be sure that they're investigating with the goal of potentially prosecuting people. We don't need another IG report. We need a criminal investigation of this, as I say, the biggest corruption scandal of all time.
And so, I want to jump to the Clinton email scandal, which, of course, Judicial Watch was central to exposing and so forth. And there's actually, the Clinton email scandal is incredibly important in understanding why Russiagate or Spygate happened at all. And maybe for the benefit of our audience, explain the connection.
Well, 2015, Judicial Watch litigation over Benghazi, believe it or not, helped expose the Clinton email. There'd be no Clinton email information without Judicial Watch pushing the State Department for Clinton emails. They finally had to fess up that we had all these emails we weren't telling anyone about. Oh, when did they begin snooping around President Trump? 2015. And remember, the Justice Department and the FBI is supposed to be investigating Clinton while working with her lawyers, because we have the documents showing, and using her dossier to target Trump. So the idea that the FBI were going to do a serious investigation of the campaign or the person they were allied with, in targeting Trump is just, it tells you what was happening. Hillary Clinton was facing significant criminal and other liability. People around her were. The Obama administration was. So what were they going to do? Well, let's distract everyone from that by targeting Trump and protecting Hillary Clinton at the same time. And once President Trump won, well, the Justice Department may actually go back and net out the justice that the American people want here. So what do we do here? We'll freeze the Justice Department by having a special counsel. We're pretending that President Trump's Russia investigation or Russia issues are serious as opposed to a hoax. And they were effective in freezing the Justice Department from doing anything on Hillary Clinton. And this is why they screamed when Barr made noises about going back and looking at these issues, because now that Mueller is over, Barr, in theory, is able to go back and relook at the Clinton email investigation, which also was suppressed, right? And in addition to the criminal victimization of the president with his illegal spying on him.
This is so fascinating. I just think it's a generally overlooked connection. So I appreciate
Clinton gave them the forget about the Clinton emails. Clinton gave them the dossier and worked with them on the dossier. Now the FBI and DOJ, but we have the other documents, John, that came out this past month or so, showing the State Department was working with the Clinton group to launder the dossier type information. Look, it wasn't, there was kind of we think there's just one dossier. No, there was more than one dossier, some of which was created by the State Department to target President Trump.
That's amazing.
The Obama State Department.
Right. And so tell me more about this John Hackett testimony.
Oh, so,
Recently.
Yeah. I know the Justice Department's been opposing us, unfortunately, in getting information about the Clinton email scandal, but a federal court wanted answers, and he authorized us to depose Clinton aides, senior State Department officials about the cover-up.
Right.
And one of these senior officials now, he's no longer at state, but he was a senior records official at the State Department. He testified. He said, he was asking them about the Clinton emails. They were worried about the answers they were giving to the requesters about there being no Clinton emails when in fact they were emails, because there was a big picture of her using a BlackBerry. And he said, well, what email is she using if she's doing that? And how are we telling requesters there are no emails? So what was their response? Well, we just won't tell them one way or another whether there are emails or not. That's the corruption. So we received testimony like that. We have other testimony from a former security official at the State Department, or I think he's still there, warned Hillary Clinton twice on her handling of BlackBerries and personal email use. Warned them about the security issues, and she acknowledged those warnings, and she had continued to use her email system. When they talked about she didn't have the intent. And getting back to Hackett, he also highlighted the fact the State Department basically releasing classified information, or not marking it as classified, from Hillary Clinton's emails, presumably because they didn't want to embarrass her more by having even more classified information linked to her account. So what does that mean? It means that classified information is put in unsecure places and potentially could be made public, because the State Department was trying to protect her candidacy and itself. And they get emails, they see some of it's classified, some of it they have to mark, even though they were trying to avoid doing that, and others they decide not to mark even though they knew better, because they were trying to protect her from having too much criminal liability for mishandling classified information. Unbelievable. And this to me is more than enough reason for the Attorney General to reopen the case. Unfortunately, the lawyers over at the Justice Department who have been litigating with us in this, they opposed all of this, us getting information like this. They didn't want us to get the discovery They were defending the indefensible. In fact, the federal court judge in our case yelled at this Justice Department for continuing to prevaricate on the Clinton email scam.
So it sounds incredible when you put it that way.
Well, and it helps explain why it is. It takes a long time to get documents declassified, because the Justice Department is run by left-wing partisan activists who want to see President Trump removed from office. So do you think they're eager to declassify anything that might help his case that he was victimized by the deep state? Same, the FBI completely out of touch in terms of accountability. Director Wray, he might as well be James Comey for all I know, in terms of his defend the indefensible of the FBI and his unwillingness to be transparent about what they did. It's a major challenge.
Well, it's a good thing we have folks like Judicial Watch going after it like a bulldog, right?
We're happy to do the work. It's essential that we do the work, but we've got to make it clear that we're having to do this work unnecessarily, in the sense that these government agencies are breaking the law in holding documents that we should be able to get access to. When we file a lawsuit, it's often because the government just ignored our request. It isn't that we're fighting over a document, we have an honest legal disagreement. It's just they won't even answer our request. And it goes on, and it hasn't stopped. And, my guess is the president is pretty frustrated when that happens. But as you can see from the Mueller harassment, he's being told every time he opens his mouth about the government agencies we elected him to run, he ought to be investigated for it. So he's stuck no matter what he does. It's just, it's a challenge.
So, the AG has also, so speaking of the Attorney General, he recently said that there is this investigation that Attorney John Huber has been running around to issues related to Hillary Clinton is winding down.
Yeah.
So what are your expectations with respect to this one?
The ever elusive.
At Honda City, we care about your experience. The process was easy and painless. Explained every detail and made sure every question was answered. Get your new CR-V for just $199 a month.
Drive Honda City Smart.
Hello everyone, this is Chuck Carnevale, co-founder of FastGraphs, the Fundamentals Analyzer software. Today's Analyze Out Loud video is on part 15 of my series where I'll be covering about 19 of the 20 sectors produced by FactSet, and this particular one is on the producer manufacturing sector. And one of the underlying things I'm doing here is attempting to point out that stocks are really different, and you really shouldn't be too general in your thinking about it. But by the way, if you like these videos, before I go on and you find them of value, please click the subscribe button below. We'd love to have you be able to have access to all our videos going forward. We thank all of you who already are subscribers. Anyway, I'm going to start with the company Acuity Brands. It's an electrical products manufacturer, and there's very interesting aspects of this graph that I want you to understand. One of my things that I talked about quite a bit in the article was that stock prices or operating results are more important than stock prices. So if I take price off of this graph, I want you to notice this is the earnings per share, operating earnings, adjusted operating earnings per share of Acuity Brands. And then when I put price on here, I want you to notice the price tracks earnings, and then we had this, what looks to be like a very excessive valuation for these years. But I want to point something out. Earnings growth rates have a lot to do with what happens to valuations. I want you to notice how the earnings turned up here. If you look at the bottom of the graph, you see some very high numbers, 16%, 24% growth, 10% growth in 2013, 20, 36, 45. Got a calculated fair value PE ratio of 15. That's what the PE of this orange line is. However, if I use my scroll bar here and I take out some of these earlier years and I kind of just focus years 2011 where we have these high growth rates I pointed out, you can see that the growth rate now has moved up to 16.7%. The other side is if I scroll out some of these forecasts and scroll out some of these lower growth rates that you see right here on the graph, if I scroll those out, then this period of time where the stock price looked like it was way overvalued, now it was a time when the company grew by almost 25% a year. So here the fair value PE is around 25, and although the stock still looks overvalued, it doesn't look as overvalued. As I start adding in some of these lower growth years, this growth rate starts to drop, and you start seeing the growth rates, getting lower and lower, and then the stock price kind of reverts to the mean. If I bring out these last few growth years here and just look at the last couple of years, we're now down to about a 7.5% to 8% growth rate. And when I go to forecasting, you'll see that the estimates going forward by 11 analysts are for about 8.5% growth, which means the stock doesn't look really undervalued here now. It looks fairly valued. Decent returns, 9 to 10% returns going forward with this company based on that. If we use the normal multiple graph here of that 28 multiple we saw earlier, then it looks really undervalued again. But once again, those are pretty high multiples, and you can see the companies historically gathered. So you always have to make your judgments, but you really need to analyze what you're looking at when you're looking at these graphs. Anyway, I do think the other story here is that we saw some really high valuation, and then we saw the reversion to the mean as the price came back into alignment, not only with earnings growth as calculated by this 15 PE, but what growth expectations would be going forward. Now, I'm doing these in alphabetical order, so my next research candidate is BorgWarner. And once again, one thing I really want to continuously focus on is how the operating results of the company, the orange line, really is and are the drivers of what the stock price does in the long run. Now, there'll be times when the market gets overly exuberant, when the market gets really overly pessimistic, high valuation here, low valuation here, but you constantly see this reversion to the mean. Overvaluation goes back to fair value, undervaluation goes back to fair value. And when I'm looking at a graph like this, I see an expectation for a down year this year, a negative 5% earnings growth. So clearly that's impacted people's idea about this company over the last year or so, and we see this big drop in stock price. If I shorten the graph a little bit, reacting to what looks to be like a down year here on this stock, looking at it from a normal PE of 15, extremely attractive at these values with about a 1.5% dividend yield. This would be a total return investment. I want you to notice BorgWarner has a pretty good analyst scorecard, because when you look at its historical record over the long run, it does have cyclicality. It did have some trouble during the recession, and it had trouble in the 2001 recession. And occasionally we get these down years, but on the other hand, a nice growth here. So if I look at long-term performance of this stock, you'll notice that the long-term performance is kind of consistent with the company's growth, even though it's undervalued today. And in this case, since November 30th of 99, the company dramatically outperformed the S&P 500. So let's move on to the next company, see what lesson we can learn. Just the diesel manufacturer. And again, if you see this high correlation between price and earnings, what the business does and how the business performs is so much more important than short-term stock prices. And what I really mean by that is, when you have a perspective like this, where you're seeing the fundamentals of the business value correlated with the stock price, you can really clearly see times when the price is overvalued and when it's undervalued. What makes it a little tricky with stocks that have cyclicality like Cummins does is you got to make sure that the cycle's not going to last too long. But in this case, we have short down cycles followed by, I'm going to say, moderate to short up cycles. So up cycles tend to be a little longer, but once again, the price tracks earnings, and the performance ends up outperforming the market by a pretty good margin over this time frame again. And I believe that's 100% related to the fact that the company's earnings growth and their dividend have both increased over time. I'm only going to cover 6 companies here, so let's move on to keep this video reasonably short for you. My next company here is Eaton Corp, very similar to what we saw with Cummins. You see the fact that the price tracks earnings. You see, when the earnings are rising, the price follows it. The price is always a jagged line, but ultimately the price goes where the earnings go. We see a down year, a downward movement in stock price during the Great Recession, which also saw a downward movement in earnings. Again, the price tracked that. We saw some weakening earnings here, and the price got weak, and then we've had earnings growth happening again. And going forward, looking at this stock, it's expected to grow at about 8% a year. At its current valuation, this would give us double-digit returns. We have a nice 3.4% dividend. The company's A- rated, has what I'll call very low debt, 28% debt. I think this would be an excellent time. Not as good as when it was undervalued like it was here, but a really good time. By the way, I'm going to add another valuation reference here that I was talking about with a subscriber today. This dividend line shows dividend yields, average dividend yields, and what you'll see here, what I want you to notice is when the dividend yield is highest, I'm going to get rid of that really aberrant line here. When the dividend yield is highest is during times when the valuation is lowest. So when you see a 3.4% dividend yield here, it was 3.4 of last year. That's when the price was down here. It's still 3.4. These are, this is within range of what I would call anything above 3% on this company would probably give you a good, idea that the stock is reasonably valued. Again, not greatly undervalued here, but reasonably valued. My next research candidate is Fortune Brands, and this is a very interesting one because, again, I want you to see the importance, not just the fact that price goes where earnings go, but I also want you to see the growth rate of earnings has a big impact. Here we've got the orange line written as the P equals growth rate, or what we call the PE equals G growth. So this PE is 25.2, which is the growth rate. But again, the devil's in the details. Look at the bottom, 57% growth, 53, 69, 16, 19, 33, 12, and 8. So as I start to scroll some of these big numbers out of this graph, the growth rate then drops to 14%, and we get a totally different perspective of valuation. I take some more years out, and I'm starting to add in these single-digit years. Now we're down to about a 9.8%. And if I scroll one more out, where we've only got really 1 year of history, and then the forecast, we're down to about a 9% growth rate. And then I look at forecasting. That's reasonably consistent with what analysts are expecting going forward. So an 8 or 9% growth rate would mean that this stock could generate 13, 14, 12%, rates of return over the next 1, 2, 3 years. It's a very attractive company, triple B plus, pays a 1.8% dividend, which is not real high, but it does offer the opportunity to get some decent growth. So this is one you might want to take a look at. And then finally, last but not least, I want to take a look at Lear Corporation. And I chose this example as well because I'm going to start with the forecasting graphs here. It's forecast to grow at about 10%. The company's normal multiple is a PE of about 11, or if you look at it, 9, 10, 8, 9, 10. So I can even use the lowest PE ratio here that the company has traded at, this 8.6. You can see now I've turned that blue line into a 8.6 PE ratio, and we still see rates of return here that would be attractive. If the company went to a higher, a more normal, or even a fair value PE of 15, you can see the rates of return here would be astronomical. But let's look at the historical graph here for a moment and look at how you got to be careful when you're analyzing stocks. Notice this very high growth. This company went public, in 2000. First thing I want to do here is I want to get rid of that anomalous growth rate there, and I'll be from the standpoint of what its growth has been more recently, and then I'm going to add the normal PE here of 10. So this company's growing still at 15 or 16% a year, but the market values this somewhere around a 10 PE. So I'm looking at forecasting and looking at normal multiples. I have the 8.6 pick here, but I can also pick that 10 PE I talked about, and somewhere between an 8 and 10 PE is probably rational. The company has a very good analyst scorecard. It's not perfect, but it's very good. So this would give you double-digit rates of return. So to end this video, the couple of points I want to make is you can see how different each of these companies are, even though they're all operating in the same industry, but they have different businesses. Remember, it's a market of stocks, not a stock market. Anyway, this has been Chuck Carmel.
Mr. I don't know. Never talked to us. I haven't seen any indication he's done anything. I don't think he was hired to do anything. Investigate whether to investigate. Remember, there was big pressure to appoint special counsel to investigate the Clinton email issues.
Right.
And Sessions and company that, Rosenstein didn't want to do that. So their solution to appoint Mr. Huber to investigate whether to investigate it further. That's the kind of the appointing language. I'm kind of exaggerating. So he wasn't really a special counsel. It was just a way to take the pressure off what you did.
Also, we find out, yes, we should investigate.
Obviously, the Attorney General is expecting him to have done something. So maybe, within the 3 weeks, he finally got his act, collated what he was able to gather, and they'll do something substantial. There still is potential criminal liability for what went on with the Clinton email scandal. People lied. The statute of limitations has not run out of the Clinton email scandal, that's for sure.
So, Tom, you mentioned that the president is frustrated. There's been a lot of discussion about the massive reaction to some tweets the president made related to these 4 congresswomen with Squad. What are your thoughts on this whole situation?
Well, the tweets weren't racist. The president was calling them out over their ideology, not their race. So smearing them as racist is just par for the course for the left. But what's more problematic is them using the powers of the House to attack him again. And so just recall where we are. The Democratic National Committee, the Democratic Party, worked in Congress with the FBI to spy on him through this manufactured Russia hoax. You had this coup cabal targeting him, anti-Trump. So they got their Mueller investigation going, which was part of that. So they took control. The House was taken over by the Democratic Party, who was behind this anti-Trump illegal activity.
Okay.
And so they doubled up on it. They continued with this reckless impeachment talk. They're trying to rifle through his tax returns. They've issued repetitive and harassing subpoena after subpoena after subpoena, probably well over 100 at this point. And so, and on top of that, they're going to censure him or pass the message of disapproval over his statements that aren't racist, but they're going to call him a racist. And it's so bad that they had to break the rules of the House to get it done.
Right. Tell me about explain that.
Well, you're not allowed to attack the president personally. So Nancy Pelosi gets up on the speaker's chair, knowing what the rules are. And this is a rule that everyone knows. If you're a House member, you got to keep it. You can't get personal on the floor. But she did it purposely, and so she had her words taken down, as the rules require. So there was more of a power fight on the Hill, and they voted to keep her words in. So they voted to let her break the rules. But I mean, it just fits in nicely. The rules of law, whether they be at the House or generally in terms of guiding government investigations, they don't matter when you're going after Trump. You can break every rule in the book. And this is why the attack on Trump is so problematic. It's not about him personally. It's about whether there's a politician that the establishment or the left or whoever doesn't like. Are we going to throw the rule of law out to get to him? And I tell you what, if the rule of law doesn't protect the president of the United States, you think it's going to protect us when the government comes after us over speech that they don't like we make? What any American makes? It's a dangerous, dangerous situation, and our constitutional republic is under assault through this attack on Trump.
I haven't heard it framed that way, but it's sent to chill down my spine as you said that.
It's dangerous. It's a dangerous situation.
I'm gonna flip a little bit more positive here. You guys have been instrumental in cleaning up a lot of what you call dirty voter rules. Like almost 2 million in LA County.
Yeah.
Big deal. And so, you've also been very outspoken about the citizenship question.
Well,
right?
It's all part of the piece,
Right.
The left doesn't want you to know how many non-Americans or Americans here in the United States. So they got some allies in the judicial branch of government, anti-Trump judicial activism, to take away the president's ability to effectively get a census question related to citizenship in the 2020 census. But it's all part of the piece. They want to erase the distinction between citizen and non-citizen. And we have tens of millions of aliens here in the United States, both legal and otherwise. And a percentage of them register to vote, studies have shown, and a percentage of them are going to vote. So you've got that illegal voting problem. And I've always thought the discussion about open borders and amnesty isn't about the Hispanic vote. It's about the illegal alien vote. And sure enough, you're having leftists talk about giving the right to vote to people who are not citizens of the United States. And they don't think the rule of law should be enforced against illegal aliens. So, of course, they're going to be able to vote, too, if they have their way. And this is why it's up to conservatives and those who want to protect our constitutional republic and the rule of law to say no to open borders, to say yes to voter ID, and more importantly, because voter ID isn't going to prevent aliens from voting, because many aliens have the voter ID necessary to vote if they're registered. Right? You got to make sure when someone registers to vote, we take more than their word that they're a citizen. Citizenship verification. And so that's the new thing that needs to be done. And on top of that, Judicial Watch is trying to make sure that federal law requires the states to take reasonable steps to clean up the rolls, and that isn't happening in too many states. Our last analysis found there were 3.5 names on the rolls. I mean, these are people who are dead or otherwise moved away. And in a place like LA County, they have more people on the rolls than. Well, it's a pretty good indication they're not taking steps to clean up the rolls. So they settled the lawsuit with us in California and LA. We sued over that, and they've agreed to begin the process, and they've already sent out a massive mailing or two to 1.6 million inactive voters, people who have voted. If they don't respond or don't vote in the next 2 federal elections, it will take a long time to get them all off. But there will be immediate people immediately removed in theory. Those rolls will be significantly cleaner. And in Kentucky, we had another lawsuit that settled, didn't settle actually. The government got a consent judgment. They gave up. They agreed to do what we needed them to do. Kentucky is a smaller state, but they're going to be mailing 250,000 names, which is, I think, 7% of their list. So this is something the Justice Department ought to be doing more of. But it's Judicial Watch is doing the heavy lifting here on this basic oversight of this desperate need we have for cleaner elections.
The citizenship question, was challenged in court, right? Basically, a judge challenged this.
Yeah,
addition.
There were lower court rulings that went against President Trump, and they went as quickly as they could to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said yes, you can ask a citizenship question, but the Trump administration didn't jump through the legal hoops that we've manufactured as a pretext to stop him from asking the question. They didn't write it like that, but that's my analysis of it.
Fascinating. Well, we're going to finish up in a moment. Is there anything else you'd like to say, draw our attention to some of the work Judicial Watch is doing now, or what you're expecting to happen Zoom this day when?
Well, I think people should recognize the Mueller testimony, this craziness over the president's tweets. It's all part and parcel of presidential harassment. And but the harassment is the degree it's targeting President Trump. We should recognize, though, it's an attack on the rule of law. And we're facing it at the border with the border crisis, the unwillingness to enforce the rule of law there, and the opposition and hatred for those enforcing the law. And then, of course, we got the clean election issue. So our system of government that protects our freedoms is under attack from a variety of very dangerous forces. You have open borders, elections that can be stolen, and a president that they're trying to hamstring in the least, if not remove, through lawless actions. This is today's United States of America, and I'm glad to say Judicial Watch is doing its part to try to defend the republic. And we just want more support, not only for the American people from doing so, but for politicians need to understand the gravity of the situation.
What can the man on the street or someone watching right now do if they might feel very depressed about what?
Well, they should recognize what the problem is. It's one thing to say, I don't like what's going on, but this is what is. You got to recognize what the problem is, so that
let people talk about what they want to do, say, well, that doesn't address the problem because this is what the problem is. So, and once they recognize the problem, they should let their elected officials know, we expect you to address it as in the ways that we've talked about here. Obviously, they can support Judicial Watch.
Tom Fitton, pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Here now with more, two members of the House Judiciary Committee who will question Mueller next week, Congressman Matt Gaetz and Andy Biggs. Hi, guys. Thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Good to be with you.
Matt, what kind of circus are you expecting from your colleagues next week? I trust that we expect that because that's all we've had from the Democrats up until now. What do you think is going to happen when this commences?
The principal obligation of the Democrats from their standpoint is to use this committee hearing as a launching off point to continue a witch hunt that the American people would like to do away with. Remember, Tammy, it's almost 6 in 10 Americans who oppose the opening of an impeachment inquiry. And what we have before us are the Democrats presenting impeachment in drag. They're sort of dressing up a non-impeachment endeavor as if it were impeachment, and they're going to try to get a license to continue their activity. Meanwhile, we want to support the work that Attorney General Bill Barr is doing to figure out why in the world we had 22 months of the President of the United States being accused of being a Russian agent with zero evidence all the way through. So we want to know when Robert Mueller found out there wasn't collusion, and we're going to expose the bias as well.
Well, this is one of the problems, of course, when you don't control the House of Representatives anymore, right? I mean, we have a chance to change that. Andy, what's interesting is that the American people want action. They want answers. We know that they're not reacting well to this. It continues despite that. Don't we want some real questions? I mean, this is where the Republicans are going to have to deliver as well. Really use this as an opportunity to get answers as opposed to some additional showboating. What do you think we can expect on that end?
Well, I think we're working hard to put together a list of questions that we think are important. Things like the origins of this investigation and the special counsel, what Mueller knew, what he knew about President Trump not being a target anymore of the investigation, why he waited till after the midterm elections. But Tammy, you're going to see a dud from the Democrats, and I'll tell you why. Because Mueller has already said he's only going to rely on what's in his report. And we already have a tamping down of expectations by Democrats.
You can't, yes, but you can't trip. But look, he had that weird press conference.
Yes,
him taking this case in the first, he took it because, and it was only political from the start. Any person agreeing to take this case is part of the problem. The choices he made with who he hired. I hope the Republicans are not proceeding here, Matt, with the presumption that he's going to play it tight. This is a man, I think, with an agenda, and it is going to be up to the Republicans to at least expose that in the nature of how they handle the questioning of Mr. Mueller. Would you not agree, Matt?
I would. We have to do more than just question Robert Mueller. We have to expose the bias investigation that was run, and we also have to expose the substantial omissions in the Mueller report. There were factual mistakes, for example, people who had ties to the U.S. State Department and Western intelligence were identified as only having ties to Russian intelligence, and there were circumstances where Russians tried to undermine our confidence in our duly elected president by feeding lies into the Steele dossier paid for by Democrats, and I think that's the real collusion we got to ask about.
I hear you. I'll ask Andy this as well. If you could ask one question, what would it be, Matt? Can you quickly give me one question?
I think that we're going to ask a question about how he selected his team. What were the standards used? What were the conflicts of interest that he tried to vet through?
Andy, what about you? What would you want to hear?
Tammy, I want to know when he knew Donald Trump wasn't the target and why they waited so long to reveal it to the American public, to wait till after the midterm elections. Was it deliberate?
Good. Those are substantive questions. I appreciate that because we're going to have to hear a bunch of those. Gentlemen, Congressman, thank you so much. Appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you. Well, the Trump administration taking further steps to end asylum system abuses. The DHS announcing today will expand its Remain in Mexico policy, requiring asylum seekers to wait outside the United States. U.S. officials are slated to make the first return illegal immigrants in the Texas border city of Brownsville as early as today. The policy was already in place in Laredo and El Paso, Texas, as well as San Diego, California. Well, the Mexican ambassador in the United States says his country is not ready to sign an agreement to help deal with the crisis at the border. Martha Barcarena says she rejects the third country safe agreement, which would force asylum seekers to head to the United States to first pursue safe haven in Mexico. If there's no deal by Monday, new tariffs could go into effect. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will be meeting with the Mexican foreign minister this weekend to talk about that agreement, along with illegal immigration as well as trade. Joining me now, Sarah Carter, investigative reporter, a fellow with the Independent Women's Forum, and a Fox Business contributor. Sarah, great to see you as always.
That's great to be on, Greg. Thank you.
So the U.S. government is now enforcing this new policy. Sorry, you got to stay on the other side of the fence or the border there. And Mexico is saying, well, gosh, we're not ready to handle all of this.
Well, then they need to stop them at their border with Guatemala. See, the problem here, Greg, and over the weekend, this past weekend, I was talking to officials, Guatemalan government officials, as well as U.S. officials about this issue. Remember, Guatemala did not show up on Monday to discuss this issue with the president inside his own nation. The leftist opposition was begging their constitutional court to stop the president of any safe country. They went so far as doing that. They put an injunction against him. Then they also put an injunction against his ability to sign any agreement with any other Central American nation or Mexico. Then you have President Obrador of Mexico. He understands. He knows what's going on here. He's allowing it to happen. I mean, just look at what he said today about El Chapo Guzman, who is the head of the Sinaloa cartel, who just got a life sentence. He basically thought it was inhumane to sentence El Chapo to life in a maximum security prison.
He's a mass murderer.
He's a mass murderer, and he's poured poison into our country for decades.
Oh, yeah.
Made billions of dollars, and the Sinaloa cartel is still being operated in Mexico by his family.
Yeah, well, you know, when you've got so-called partners like that, Mexico,
that's right.
You know, it's hard to get anything accomplished. By the way, I read your story that you broke about the Oversight Committee and their report that the hysteria by the media notwithstanding, the truth is that roughly 95% of children have actually been reunited with their families, right?
That's absolutely correct. So of the numbers, of the data that has been given to the House Oversight Committee, remember this is thousands of pages of documents, a ton of work by Health and Human Services to ensure that they're getting the correct data to the committee. They have shown that of the data, which is more than half of the kids that they had in their custody at the time. Now, remember, because people keep coming across the border, all of them, about 95%, have been returned to their families. So they're not even being held by the U.S. This is all politicizing. Let me give you some stats here, Greg, just so that the viewers understand what's going on here. In the last 5 years, family units have increased. That means people traveling with children to the United States across the U.S. southern border, over 620%.
Right.
Asylum claims in the last 8 years have increased over 1,700%. In 2013, 1 out of 10 people used to apply for asylum because it's almost, not now, of course, because they let them do that. But now it's, literally, and now it's 1 out of 10. So it increased up to 17. This is what we're looking at, and this is the reason why President Trump and his administration, there is a humanitarian the border. You cannot come into the United States just because you or because there's poor economic conditions. That's not a reason for asylum. President Obama said that himself.
I was going to say, those are President Obama's words. But of course, it's, have acute amnesia for, 5 or 10 days. Before I say goodbye, I have to ask you, this is right into your wheelhouse, the insufferable James Comey, who loves to insinuate himself into every conceivable issue. The Reverend Comey, I guess. Bishop Comey, we should call it. So the latest thing is he says he compared Americans who support President Trump, he compared them to a, quote, mob, and they should be sent back to their turn. Just prove all what you and I have been saying all along, that Comey is nothing but a hyper who abused his position of power for political reasons to try to influence the election and destroy the president.
Absolutely, Greg. This type of rhetoric, the former, by the way, fired former FBI director of the United States, and the rhetoric coming out of his mouth and that of John Brennan has been incredible. In fact, it's extremely dangerous rhetoric, and that's what's going to happen during the hearing next week with Mueller, what we're going to be seeing evolving from this, because there is has agreed to testify, and it's not for any good purposes. Remember, these people are very tight. Mueller and Comey are very close friends, and to turn around and call Americans who voted for a president to put him into office a mob, and say that those Americans should be put back into a dark corner is extremely, it's really unheard. It really should, I think, take a mouth closed. You have said this before, everything you say can and will be held against you. So I think there's a lot of questions that the American people actually have of James Comey, and I would love the opportunity to ask him those questions.
He is the most malevolent actor in this entire hoax and witch hunt. And the damage that James Comey did to the FBI, take a decade for the FBI, which is a very good institution.
Absolutely.
To recover. And there's James Comey, the vainglorious Comey, weighing in on top of the mountain. Sarah Carter, good to see you. Thanks.
Good to see you too, Greg. Thank you. For the heated healthcare debate, Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, the latest lawmaker to support Medicare for all. She touted the controversial plan in her home state last night. Watch.
1 in 4 Americans could not afford healthcare they need because of the prohibitive costs. This is unacceptable. It is a moral imperative that we fix it, and Medicare for all will do that.
Joining me right now in a First on Fox interview is MIT Ford professor of economics, the architect of Obamacare, one of the architects, and a former Treasury Department Deputy Assistant Secretary, Jonathan Gruber. Jonathan, it's good to see you again. Thanks so much for being here.
Good to be here, Maria.
Reaction to what you just heard from Omar, first people, in terms of the
health insurance is really expensive, and we need to solve it in a way that recognizes that we can't allow it to discriminate against the sick. That's the fundamental goal that most Americans discrimination. I've seen that while expanding affordability to insurance.
And yet, many markets saw premiums go on by double digits.
3 years, so in the first 3 years after Trump was elected, premiums went up on average 7% a year. They went up 0 the first 2 years, and then 22%.
But in some markets, Jonathan, it was up, 25% or something. I mean, there were some. You're giving me an average, but there were some states that saw really prohibitive, very expensive premium increases.
Absolutely. I mean, any price varies, Maria. The key thing we want to focus on is the average. Right. The average was that the cost growth was much slower, about half of what it was before. President Trump, unfortunately, and the Republicans, by doing things like mandate and creating uncertainty in insurance markets, caused those premiums to go up a lot. But they still
you can't blame the Trump administration, sure. Jonathan. They went up
sure. Before President Trump was elected, they went up 7% per year on average. They went up. Look, there's only two truths in the world, Maria.
But the administration didn't even do anything. They were continuing with Obamacare, and the premiums went up. But listen, I don't want to ask Obamacare was. I want to ask you really about Medicare for all. Wilmar's answer, she says the cure is Medicare for all.
I don't agree with that answer. I think is that the private market will in the interests of many Americans, and we need more expanded government involvement. That could take many forms. One form would be to build on what the Affordable Care Act accomplished, as suggested, by making premiums more affordable, by offering a public option to individuals, not a mandate, not forcing people to go into government insurance. Have public and public.
Yeah, I mean,
can't afford your private option.
Well, the other thing is, in terms of Medicare for all, I mean, with the entire private insurance industry, 180 million people are getting their insurance. So doing away with that, it is actually creating Medicare for nobody.
That's you are creating Medicare for all. However, my main point, Maria, which
so you're not creating Medicare for all because it's a federal program that's going to do away with people's private insurance, 180 million people.
And you're going to put them in Medicare, agreeing with your main point. I think it's very difficult. You look at the opposition under Obamacare, that small number of people, really crappy health insurance, and they got very. If you take that analogy, ask 180 million people to give up good health insurance, they're not going to be happy about it. Look, I think that we need to separate 2 points here. One point is that involvement to ensure that the health insurance market provides care for everyone. That doesn't mean Medicare for all necessarily, but it does mean the
idea of having a doing health care for everybody. I mean, why would I want some bureaucrat making decisions on my health care? If I'm able to get that MRI test, if I'm able to get the medicines that I want, maybe it's to the government. That's the whole issue, having the government own that piece.
Well, Maria, the government would not own that piece of your life if you didn't want that. People in Medicare, the government owns that piece of their life. They seem pretty happy with it. That's why Medicare for all is caught on, is because Medicare is so popular with the elderly. That for everyone. I think that if you and I want a different health insurance plan that makes different choices than Medicare, we should have that option. But you and I can afford that option. The people in Florida and Texas who are below the poverty line commit the political malpractice of denying them free health insurance coverage. Maria, it's either take a government plan or be uninsured.
So can you have a program then where you keep the private industry in place, 180 million people continue to get their health care the way they want to get it, but then for the year you can do some kind of a program for those without messing with the large group of people who are getting their health care from private.
Look, anytime you do a massive public change, there will be some impact on the private market. But it was so that was a huge change, and yet employer-sponsored insurance continued to grow. Some people did have to change their plan. We'll admit that. But it's a big number. So to answer your question, Maria, majority of people, and overall, if you put in a new public option, they can keep what they like. This can't promise, and I think it's a mistake to promise, that literally no one will be affected. The relevant question. The relevant question is if you can provide new health insurance for 30 million poor Americans, a very small number of those with health insurance, for example, have to change the kind of plan they have, I think that's a price worth paying.
This all sounds like deja vu to me. In fact, Democratic frontrunner, former Vice President Joe Biden, making familiar promises now on the campaign plan that your former boss, President Joe Biden.
Anyone who has their employer-based health insurance they like, they can keep it.
You've got health insurance, you like your plan, you can keep your doctor, you can keep your plan.
Yeah, right. We know how that helpful. California Senator Kamala Harris also spoke out, assuring voters that they can keep their plan. This is your first television interview reacting to the Democrats' health care plans, Jonathan. What's your reaction?
My reaction is that the statements they're making, saying that for the vast majority of people, this will not affect you. That was true for Romney. That was true for Obamacare. For the vast majority, they're live by the law. Now, did that mean health insurance didn't change? No. Look, I remember going to the White House after Obamacare was passed, and President Obama's advisor said, look, we are now. Anything that changes people. And that's what people's health insurance changed. It wasn't because of Obamacare. It's because health insurance changed.
Well, it was because of Obamacare, because it was way too expensive, Jonathan. And not only that, but what it did to businesses was really worth noting. Because what it did to businesses is it increased the businesses' costs, and then they were facing these higher expenses, so they pulled back on money elsewhere. So for businesses, small businesses in particular, complained up and down the street about how expensive Obamacare was, Jonathan.
You may have heard complaints, and we've had this conversation before. But Maria, I urge you to look at the data. Since Obamacare was passed, the premium for health insurance have grown 3. Okay, that's what the data shows. Employers didn't pay more, but look, Maria, before Obamacare, some employers paid more. In the 10 years before Obamacare, 10% lost their employer-sponsored health insurance. Was that Obamacare's fault? No. Things change in the health. Costs go up. It's only 2 truths in America, Maria. Healthcare costs go up, and baseball games take too long. Okay? And basically, health insurance costs Obamacare, they're going up after Obamacare. But they went up slower after Obamacare than they did.
All right, we'll leave it there, Jonathan. Thanks so much. Jonathan Gruber.
Thank you so much for having me.
Joining us once again. Good to see you, sir. Thank you.
President Trump, by the way, disavowing the "send her back" chant while speaking to reporters in the Oval Office. Roll the tape.
By the way, but and I felt a little bit badly about it, but I will say this: I did, and I started speaking very quickly.
All right, well, joining us is Lara Trump 2020 senior character for the president. Lara, welcome, by the way. Lovely to have you here. A little out of character for the president to walk back and walk something back a little bit. What's your take on that?
No, but he wasn't the one that was changed. He started talking about the and some of his issues with them and things was very anti-American and just disappointing that he'd seen from them. And then the crowd, I was there, by the way, so I witnessed the whole thing in real time. The crowd themselves started people right there in the front, but I'll say it. He's saying, you know, I didn't love it, so I mean, what can you do? No matter what he would have done, actually, by the way, problem for the mainstream media.
Is it you don't like this country, you hate this country, you don't love this?
I love this country. You do have people with flags in our country and kneeling for the national anthem and whatever showcasing your disdain for America. What? And I think that's really the whole point of everything when you get down to what the president, and this has turned into like such a big deal now, but that's these people say they don't love our country, they call oligarchs attacking people that are trying to keep us safe. Why are you here? You know?
All right, this one for you, Lara. The Democrat debates continue at the end of the month, July 30th, I believe. Last time, Kamala Harris took a direct shot, said it hurt him.
What do you think is going to happen this time around? It seems like we got 4 front runners: Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, we say is Joe Biden still a front runner? I feel like he slipped a lot, and I remember before he even announced, so many people asking me, from the campaign perspective, are you so concerned about Joe Biden? And I've always said, Joe Biden is not a big concern of ours, and I think you saw in that last debate and a couple of things that have happened since then, his comments on China and the tariffs with China, I think were not good to him. But certainly he's preparing for this debate when it comes to Harris, because she really took him down in a way in the first debate. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see Bernie and Elizabeth Warren.
I want to get back to the school issue. This issue is not going away. They dominated for almost a week. Is that a good thing from your perspective with the Trump campaign? Do you want the focus to be on 4 radical, progressive, left members of Congress as opposed to the Democrat Party as a whole?
Well, I think now what you've seen is that they are behind these 4 women. If you want to hear what the Democrat Party stands for, and Nancy Pelosi's backed them up, everybody's rallied around them, I think that's a great thing. These are the women, and these are the face of the Democrats. And if you agree with open borders and abolishing ICE and calling our Border Patrol agents Nazis and all of the other kind of crazy things that we've heard out of these women, that if you're a black or a brown face, you have to vote with us, you have to go along with us. That is crazy. This is the United States of America, and we can make our decisions based on intelligence. So I think it's good for us, and we're okay with that.
That's a good place to leave it right there. Lara Trump, thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bernie Sanders facing some heat post for her own campaign, claiming they get the $15 minimum wage. Their candidate, field organizers for the Sanders campaign, who currently make about $36,000 a year, tell the Post they work a minimum of 60 hours a week, which works out to less than $13 an hour. Union members letter that this is to be expected, and it's expected to be sent to the campaign manager. Quote, many field staffers are barely managing to survive financially, which is severely impacting our team's productivity. Some field organizers have already left the campaign as a result, end quote. Zachary, start with you. What do you make of this?
Well, it's certainly not particularly good optics for the campaign. And Sanders has been very good at raising a lot of money, so it's not like they could. They're not a bootstrap. So it's a little puzzling. Wouldn't put his mouth is literally in this particular case. And again, it's money that he has, and it's money that you could certainly pay these people. So not the best PR right now for Bernie Sanders in this campaign.
Gary, your thoughts?
Well, the great thing is it's a real learning lesson here. Look, I'm going to paraphrase an old saw and give the definition of a conservative. It's a liberal payroll. Bernie is basically, with his campaign funds and the money he gathers, has to pay all these people. He's learning the hard lesson that everyone that has had a payroll, has had to fire people, has had to hire people, who's an entrepreneur, has to learn. In that, when the government starts to dictate how much you make, it's very tough to run an organization. I guarantee if there was no minimum wage, these people would probably be happy to work with Sanders, knowing that they have to make this arbitrary $15 an hour has raised their hackles, probably rightly so. They're probably working way more than the $36,000 a week. So I hope this is raised as an issue, and Bernie starts to learn, although he won't, what it's like to run a company in America when the government dictates certain parameters of your organization.
Exactly. To build on Gary's point, the thing is that he gave the typical response that CEOs give, right? When they're questioned on wages. You know what? We pay similar to our competitors, and that's the same excuse that Bernie Sanders gave. So that he's really not walking the walk, but he's talking the talk. But also, if I were to give a suggestion to all the employees in the campaign, like I see in New York City, what they need to do is get that big balloon rat, blow it up as big as they can get it, and sit it right outside of Bernie Sanders' headquarters and say, you know what, you're the rat, pay fair wages. The irony is he encouraged his workers to unionize. I think it would be funny if he loses because he can't compete with his competitors because he has to pay higher than market wages. But that is basically, look, if he was actually smart about this policy, he would come back and say, this is exactly why you need a federal law, because I can't pay my workers more than my competitors do, or I will go out of business and not win the presidency. But he's not even saying that. He kind of gets lost, and I encourage them to whatever. Look, the bottom line is it highlights why a federal minimum wage isn't such a great idea if it's high. As he said, it doesn't seem like that novel an idea when he invented it, because when he invented it, it was even higher. In 20 years, $15 is not going to seem like a very high minimum wage. The bottom line is states and cities should be doing these above kind of normal ones. That's what we've seen going on. It'll work for some of them, but you set the federal level at a level when some states are so much lower income levels and so much lower cost of living. It doesn't make any sense to have it this high.
Here's the thing, though, guys. I just want to make one point that's really crucial here. It's that the campaign workers for Sanders, they are not hourly workers. They are paid on a salary. And there are certain industries where you just sort of accept that it's a great job and you want to be on that team and you're willing to take that salary. They agreed to this.
Yeah, entry-level media being one of them. So I want to know from Jonas and Gary, when the federal government passed the first minimum wage laws in the 1960s, and it actually goes back before that, those were comparatively high. That was a pretty high mark. Are you opposed to that? Would you have been, if we'd been having this panel in 1967, would you have had the same responses to a federally mandated minimum wage?
No, in fact, what I don't understand
first of all, you can't have the cost of living. We'll agree when he said a federally mandated wage. It's entirely different in Des Moines than it is in New York City. So that's one. The country is not equal to. Supply and demand out there. You know that, Zach. And there are people at the minimum Walmart, and down the street, the local, coffee shop probably can't get anyone to work. It just depends on supply and demand. I don't think government is it should be in any economics, no matter what they think is fair to any company.
Couple of questions here, because the House did pass, pass a bill saying it raised gradually. It's not likely to pass in the Senate. But do you think that this is the start of the turning of the tide here?
I think it should have been turned into an index system to inflation a long time ago. Democrats have had plenty of opportunities in power to set this so they don't have to have this political football to play with. But I also think it should be set at a level that is below, essentially, a high wage, so it doesn't create disruption in the workforce. As you would imagine, there's obviously a level that would shut down the economy. If there was a $50 minimum wage, things would stop working. So to arbitrarily pick 15, a level that I believe is higher than it originally was, adjusting for inflation, could cause disruptions, particularly in areas where that is a very high wage. It's hardly have any effect in New York City, but that's why it legalized, tied to cost of living, and index to inflation to make the problem go away. Technically, we don't need one, but I think it makes the workers not want to revolt, and that's an important thing for capitalism to have too. So I think it should be there at some level.
The 2020 Democrat primary is turning into an absolute circus, and CNN is being brutally mocked for making it even worse. CNN credibility and turning it into a game show network by revealing the upcoming debate lineups like this.
We want to randomly draw candidates.
I'm going to take them and mix them up so that we can then draw from the candidate box.
Another shuffle.
Up. These a good mix. I'm going to give them a good shuffle.
Into the debate night box.
We have multiple camera views. You can watch the camera above me overhead.
Now, I won't look into the box, but you can look into the box through the overhead camera. Let's start.
Wow. Stuff to watch. Because there's so many candidates, it's broken into two nights. Facing off on night one, Bernie Sanders and Liz Warren will battle to see who's the biggest socialist. And Greg and I are particularly happy. Marianne Williamson will join them on stage to spread the love. Second night features a rematch between Kamala Harris. Sleepy Joe will actually fight back this time. Greg, I hadn't actually seen it because I don't watch CNN until then. I think they made it less interesting.
It is amazing. The serious music made it even funnier. CNN is officially the carnival. They already have the clowns.
Yes.
Now they got the attractions. They need to add a dunk tank, pie eating contest, a ring toss where Don Lemon can toss rings onto Chris Cuomo's head. You know what CNN is? And I feel like I'm being too mean or not mean enough. CNN is the network without close friends. Because close friends tell you when you're making a fool out of yourself, hey, that's an obvious toupee wolf, or, Chris, you're not funny. People will come and tell you that your fly's down or whatever, or you need mouthwash. But nobody's telling CNN that you guys look like idiots when you do this stuff.
Like MSNBC should be like, hey guys,
yes.
I want to knock that up. Got some cabbage in your teeth.
Headline News Network. Knock them on the door.
Lisa, what do you think the strategy was here? Was it just trying to grab ratings, or was it just
primarily for ratings? And apparently the special, the draw, I didn't watch it either, but I read the Washington Post write-up about it, that an 8-person panel analyzing every move throughout the entire hour. You had multiple people pulling the cards and figuring out which candidate would be on what night. So absolutely ridiculous. But on the substance, what I'm interested in looking at for the debate is how badly diminished Biden and Bernie are by product of who they're on the stage with. Because remember last time, Kamala Harris did some major damage to Joe Biden. And then also, Bernie on the stage with Elizabeth Warren, someone who basically has the exact same policy positions, but who's younger and more interesting. You could see how that could hurt him significantly.
There was a racial angle to this whole mess. One of the CNN analysts actually commented on it. Let's watch it.
It's also worth noting in this, the most diverse field the Democratic Party has ever had. All the first night are white candidates, and the racial diversity is entirely in the second night, which just changed the dynamic, especially because, obviously, race has been a front and center issue in America this week. It has been in this campaign. It is an issue that is sort of coursing through this Democratic primary. What do you think about that one?
Does that mean CNN's racist then, if they have that?
Yes. He called their network racist.
Yeah. Isn't that the rules?
Well, I tell you, you guys see race in everything.
Someone clip that.
But I must say, this was all the silliness that CNN did, that you guys rightly have mocked them for, it was a transparent operation. You could see what was going on. There was no bias implicit. What kind of criticism or critique is that? And of his own network, I don't know. To me, it was obvious, that the real news here is, as Lisa was saying, you're going to have Kamala Harris against Joe Biden. So it's going to be the redo in Detroit, right? And you want to know what's going to happen. He said he wasn't prepared last time. Let's see if he's prepared this time. But he's also going to have Cory Booker on that stage. And if you really look at it, Booker's been far more critical of Biden for saying, not about busing, but for saying he can cross the partisan line, do business, and prove I did business with segregationists in the past. That opened a big door. Guess what? Cory Booker did not benefit when Kamala Harris went up in the polls. So does he see this now as his opportunity? It's going to be like a pincer movement around Joe Biden. By the way, some polls came out today. And again, Biden is up. I think Biden's up +9 on everybody.
But Marion's coming on strong.
Your girl. You got a favorite here.
I'm glad you brought the polls that just came out on, because Donald Trump, 48% approval rating in the NBC News poll. But moving on, Emily, what do you think about this spectacle?
All right, so I did in my head winners and losers. And really the only winner that I thought was Kamala Harris, because CNN is obviously a total loser by that whole debacle, rightly mocked. Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, basically because of that draw, lost the opportunity to challenge Biden on stage. So for them, they're obviously disappointed. And then Biden, I put him in the loser category because he's going against Kamala again, and also Booker, right? So he's going to be subjected to likely a lot of attacks. Yes, based on his racial record, whatever. I think that for him, it would not behoove, but a synonym for him to defend his record by really not going there, because it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. So what he should do is say, look, I'm not here to litigate the past.
I'm on the stage to talk about now, starting with the man in the Oval Office. Let's move forward. That's a better strategy. And then for him versus Kamala, it's either Raiders versus Steelers early 70s, or is it 1976 where the Raiders came back and actually beat them?
By the way, so it's analogies.
Let me just.
Dana's not even here.
Let me just go to the first night. Because the first night's really interesting to me. I know
because of Marianne.
Is that what it is?
She's in front. One. She's jumped in front of Corey, Kirsten, and somebody else in New Hampshire. I'm telling you, she's the Trump. She's the Trump one. We should put a bet on it right now.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
What are you going to bet?
Trump? You believe that she's going to be president of the United States?
She's the wild card. Counting on her getting the nomination.
Really?
It's because I was wrong on Trump.
You're going to back or you're voting for?
I was wrong on Trump for a year and a half. So
don't imagine how I feel.
Picking up what she's putting down.
Yes.
Well, I think you should open your
love
mouth.
is hit me hard. One.
Anyway, I'm interested in Sanders versus Warren.
Do you think they're going to clash? Because they're
That's an
friendly.
interesting question.
They
Because
Warren should take
Sanders,
shots.
I think, is a little bit of, as I said, a rerun. Warren has lots of ideas. Music, right? And the question is there more benefit for them in going after each other or teaming up and saying that Joe Biden, he's the problem, he's the old stuff, and we're the new.
Or focus on Trump the whole time.
Right. And then the other lane here is Klobuchar, Bennett. It's a moderate. It's a
12 items or less lane.
And does Buttigieg prove people wrong?
Yeah.
Well, he's raised a lot of money, so a lot of other people think that. Greg, going back to CNN.
Right. Forget the candidates.
I feel like they have an identity crisis.
Right.
Are they a serious news network? Are they the network on New Year's that everybody gets drunk and then they have these little things like they look like Vegas?
Interesting thing that's happened to them because it's big bull. Whether it's Fox, we know everybody knows that we've got opinions and we're not reporters. At least we're spouting off opinions. When you turn on CNN, you have no idea what you're going to get. You'll have a guy report something and then an opinion in the same breath and then get it wrong or maybe he gets it right, but you can't tell. It's kind of dishonest, and I think they are. They are in an identity crisis because they used to be something, and what they are.
Don Lemon, who's throwing back drink after drink on New Year's and calling Trump, you know what, and now he's the debate moderator.
Also, can you imagine?
Slander him for drinking.
MSNBC used Rachel Maddow in their debates, and then you've got, or the NBC debate, and then now you've got Don Lemon, who is essentially an opinion host, as you just pointed out, being used in CNN. I mean, can you imagine if Fox did something similar?
No. Who did we have that was that?
I'm not getting it. I just think we should be careful on this.
With Republican Congressman Steve Scalise. Always today, I first want to get your reaction to what's bubbling up almost to a volcano pitch on the left side of the chamber.
Yeah, it's a shame that Speaker Pelosi kind of lost control of her speakership yesterday when she broke the House rules. She actually had to force her members back to vote to allow her to come back and speak again because of the violation of the rules of the House. And so basically what they said is the rules shouldn't apply to Nancy Pelosi that apply to everybody else. That's not the way things are. They've got to stop this drumbeat every single day towards impeachment, of harassing the president, his family, his staff. Today you're seeing more legislation on the floor. 2 hours. They want to admonish Barr because he didn't break the law. To comply with what they said would have required him to break the law. This is ridiculous. People want us to be focusing on real issues. There is a crisis at our border right now as we speak, and they won't address that problem. We're causing thousands of people to flood across our border every single day. They won't work with the president to fix that, to lower drug prices. They want to just keep harassing him and his family, and I think people are fed up with it.
So another part of this coverage has to do with what the president is talking about, and that vote yesterday. You talk about those 4 GOP, 1 independent, who went along with Democrats, but out of 197, that might look like unity. Here's what the president said. He was touting the GOP unity. So great to see how unified the Republican Party was on today's vote concerning statements I made about 4 Democratic congresswomen. If you really want to see statements, look at the horrible things they said about our country, Israel, and much more. So I'm reading a tweet there. Your reaction?
Well, if you think anti-Semitic things that some of those members of Congress said. Just last week, AOC called Speaker Pelosi a racist. Where are the admonitions for those kind of things? They've never been willing to stand up against their most radical elements of their caucus, the squad, and the others associated with them. And frankly, they're all part of that Socialist Democrat Party now because they're condoning to government. And by the way, when you look at some of the things that have been said about toward that he colluded with Russia when he never did, saying that people that are coming across the border illegally are being forced to drink out of toilets. That's not even happening, yet they continue to say these kind of false and degrading things every single day. Why not work together with Republicans and Democrats to solve real problems that are affecting hardworking families?
Look, you bring up compelling arguments for bipartisanship. A lot of people across the country are holding their breath because they're wondering about most of things, the debt ceiling. I know Speaker Pelosi's worried about that. She's talking with Secretary Mnuchin. But at the bottom of all of this, this fight among Democrats, and could it, and I'm wondering, Congressman, does this become so distracting that before the break you don't get anything done as they fight amongst themselves?
Well, people are tired of them fighting amongst themselves, and that's really what it's all about.
Is that what it's about?
It's all about fighting for power, for more power, one even more.
The Speaker's power among those four women. Clearly, Pelosi's told them.
Well, she says that, but then, of course, they've threatened other Democrats in their primaries. And so you've got these rank-and-file Democrats in swing districts to cross AOC and her squad because they feel like she'll take them out in their primary. And she's threatened to do just that. And in the meantime, they're not bringing real there are bipartisan things being done, but Speaker Pelosi won't even bring that to the floor. USMCA, we've got a real opportunity to get a better deal with Mexico and Canada. The president wants it, they want it, the unions want it, most Democrats want it, yet that won't even be brought to the floor because we've got all of this foolishness going on.
Can I just pause right there with USMCA? That, I don't mind, but it does have a work. Like, don't you want to try to get that done so we can go forward on some of those trade issues?
Right. There are a lot of things at play. Canada wants to get this done. They've got elections coming up in October. You don't want to get this bogged in to their elections. Mexico's already passed it. It's a better. Actually, if you look at the state of Wisconsin, for example, or Michigan, there are a lot of areas of Canadian markets that are closed to American products. That this allows us to sell more American products into Canada, into Mexico, and they won't bring it to the floor. I was just with Ambassador Lighthizer earlier, and he's working hard to get this. We can, but it should have gotten done months ago. Let's stop the foolishness on the floor. Use the floor to help hardworking families, not to settle personal disputes.
I want to go a little deeper with you because I know that you have relationships across the aisle, as many Republicans do. You in particular, though, in leadership, you know Nancy Pelosi. What does she need to say when she steps up to that lectern at any moment to get beyond this point, maybe even about her behavior on the House floor yesterday?
He ought to address that because it wasn't us alone that said she broke the rules. The majority leader is the one who actually took the chair because another Democrat vacated the chair. And the majority leader is the one who made it clear that she did break the House rules. She ought to own up to that and just say, let's move on. Let's be better than this. Let's actually focus on policy. Stop the drumbeat of bills and legislation, resolutions that aren't going anywhere, that are just designed to attack people based on personalities. We have real bipartisan bills, things that can get done to lower drug prices. We just passed a bill out of committee to stop all these spam phone calls that come in by the robocalls that people get that annoy them every single day. There was a bipartisan agreement on that. Those are the things that should be on the floor being debated to help hardworking families, not the personality disputes and the fights over.
Well, I tell you, Congressman Scalise, you have taking copious notes on what you said. Things are getting done, and you've listed some things where you're ready to go forward. We will be perched to see if the Speaker of the House will lead her majority to do just some of those things. Appreciate your time.
Hopefully so.
Thank you.
Well, thanks
very
a lot.
much.
Good to be with you.
Tonight, the disgraceful, radical, extreme Democratic Socialist Party, they had what will likely be the first of many failed votes to attempt to impeach a duly elected president Will somebody please give these people a copy of the Constitution? We'll have more coming up. Also, we begin tonight with members of the, quote, squad ramping up their attacks on anyone and everyone who dares to disagree with their extreme radical socialist ideas. Now, 2020 hopefuls, they have been put on notice. Everyone in the Democratic Party, you better fall in line, or A, you might be called a racist, or B, they are keeping the squad the equivalent of an enemies list of fellow Democrats that oppose them, I guess so they can campaign against them. It's getting that ugly. Now, the squad has already lobbed racism charges against both President Trump and even their own speaker, Nancy Pelosi. And while Pelosi is totally powerless, as we've been telling you, to defend herself, the president is firing back in a big way. Just moments ago, the president wrapped up what was a massive rally in Greenville, in North Carolina, where he had a very special message for the new radical leaders of this Democratic Extreme Socialist Party. Take a look.
So Representative Omar blamed the United States for the attacks on our country, saying that is a reaction to our involvement in other people's affairs. Her colleague, Representative Rashid, agreed with Omar's characterization of 9/11 and said that members of Congress who support Israel forgot what country they represent. Cortez said that illegal immigrants are more American than any person who seeks to keep them out ever will be. Can you believe that? That's what she's saying. She described contemporary America, that's you, that's me, that's all of us, as garbage. And they're so angry. Even yesterday, they went on the stage. I said, let me watch this. And the anger, they were trying to be nice, but it's hard. It's hard for them to do that.
You know, smelly Walmart voters, irredeemable deplorables, people that cling to their God, their guns, their Bibles, and religion. Few politicians have had the courage to call out the radical base of the Democratic Party, but that's why we, the American people, elected Donald Trump, in spite of what California, Washington, and other states wanted. And while the media mob, the Democrats attack this president, they do it compulsively, obsessively. His approval ratings among Republicans keeps going way up. And today, new polls show the president's numbers increased by 5 points. According to another poll, 49% of likely voters, certainly a plurality, believe the accusations of racism against President Trump are nothing more than a political ploy. That is up 6 percentage points over the last poll conducted. And here's why. Let me help educate the radical masses. While you may not like it, the term love it, love America, leave America, it has nothing to do with race. And by the way, is hardly a new characterization or concept to the loudest critics of the what we call Blame America First crowd. Was it racist for Senator Kamala Harris to tell President to, quote, go back from where he came from? She did that today. And get this, in 2016, scores of celebrities, other media elites, remember they all vowed to leave the United States if President Trump was elected? Oh yeah, there are their names. Well, there's nothing racist about that. They didn't like him. The only problem, he left. Even offered a plane with caviar and champagne, but they had to promise never to come back. And tonight, with the media mob and the Democrats' attacks on the president, minute, hour of every 24-hour day, it's just one pathetic last-ditch effort to take the president down. They still have not accepted the 2016 of We the People. The 9-month FBI investigation, we'll use the words of Lisa Page. Nothing. They found nothing. Peter Strzok, no there as relates to collusion, conspiracy to conspire with Russia. The bipartisan Senate investigation, same result, nothing. The House investigation, nothing. Mueller concluded no conspiracy at all with Russia, no collusion, and of course, no obstruction as per the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, and Office of Legal Counsel. So their phantom charges of obstruction and collusion all fell short. And the great likelihood is that 1 week from tonight, I'm looking forward to this. When Mueller testifies before Congress, and I would even argue at this moment, enough to testify before Congress, he'll have to answer real questions. I would say the odds are very high against the Democrats. Even if Devin Nunes is right, they're likely coordinating what they're going to say and how he's going to respond. Why do I suspect they would do something like that? Now, what do Democrats have left in their playbook? All right, Russia, that's a dud. Obstruction, a dud. Okay, we'll try racism. That will be a dud playbook the Democrats use in every single election season, although it's 4 years anymore. As I've always laid out on this program and showed you ad after ad after ad in the history of it. No, it's like every day now. Yeah, the Democratic Congress actually launched what was the first of probably many pathetic attempts to impeach the president, resoundingly defeated in the House of Representatives. This is an embarrassment. We'll just get these right and tell them to read it. If not, maybe we want, because they won't clear it. Take a look.
I just heard that the United States House of Representatives has overwhelmingly voted to kill the most ridiculous project I've ever been involved in. How stupid is that on impeachment? I want to thank those Democrats because many of them signed 332 5-1.
Now, of course, doing the bidding of the new leaders of the Democratic Party. Remember this from newly elected Congresswoman. Remember Tlaib? Remember she said,
There's someone you want bullies. Maybe they don't. We're going to.
And during an interview today on CBS Today, Tlaib offered no apology or retraction for her vile comments about the President of the United States. I would give her apologize for doing that. Take a look.
From day one, I truly believe that he has committed impeachment. And me, you believe that? Even me personally, I didn't do it on the House floor. And I'm going to be unapologetic in myself. 70% of Americans curse. I'm real. This is who I am. I'm rooted in where I come from, and it's very common for me and for many of my residents to say things like that. But
so
for folks, absolutely not. I'm unapologetic about it.
All right, this radical Democratic Party is in a very dark, very scary place. There are no more moderates in today's extreme Democratic Party, as socialism is completely, and radicalism completely, even far left liberal Nancy San Francisco liberal treat is now considered too moderate. It's all aspects of the Democratic Party's message and their platform. Who gets in their way or their radical dreams is accused of either big whatever. Tlaib became the second member of the squad to actually accuse her own House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, of racism. Two of the four radicals that are leading in the House and influencing the 2020 Democratic candidate. Let's take a look.
Are you speaking to Nancy Pelosi?
Our teams are and our chiefs are.
But shouldn't it be a face-to-face? I agree.
I
As opposed to your people and her people. Shouldn't it be a face-to-face? But you're new members of Congress. No, I'm very protective. With all due respect, she doesn't need protection. She's the new member, not the speaker. No, but I have every right to sit down with her. She is Speaker of the House. She can ask for a meeting to sit down with us for clarification. Knowledge has not been racial justice work in our country for a long time. We are women of color. So when you do single us out, be aware of that.
Pretty serious accusation against the so-called speaker, really the speaker in name only, Nancy Pelosi. And as I keep reminding you, she's now merely a new radical socialist extreme Democratic Party, which is why she can't even defend herself from their attacks. Remember, she asked last week, "You have anything to say to my face?" Oh, what did AOC do? She goes right to Twitter and runs out again.
Aren't you concerned with the president? Is there and you know what? With all due respect, let's not waste our time on that. We're talking about what we're going to do to help the American people. Our caucus is unified on all of that. Throughout the whole campaign, I said to the candidates, don't even mention his name. Everybody knows who he is. You don't have to describe him to everybody. We're not having him set our agenda. We're setting our own agenda.
Now, she's not setting the agenda at all, right? Ocasio-Cortez, Tlaib, Omar, and Presley are running the show. The 2020 presidential hopefuls, they're all sucking up to this new leadership. Their beliefs are beyond scary. It would destroy America as we know it. We know about their dreams to turn America into a socialist eco-state known as the Green New Deal, but perhaps even more alarming are their views by some in this group before on and the Jewish people with the lead for Louis Farrakhan's racist anti-Semitic newspaper. Howls around with a known bigot. Her name, Linda Sarsour. In fact, Sarsour was an invited guest at the lead swearing in. Sarsour openly supports Sharia law, blamed her bad reputation. And Congresswoman Omar also hangs out with Linda Sarsour. No surprise there. Omar has frequently tweeted anti-Semitic tropes. She wants to accuse lawmakers of being controlled by, quote, remember the Benjamins? Omar even accused Bill of hypnotizing the world. But in today's interview with Gayle King, well, Congresswoman Omar said she has no regrets. She regrets nothing. Actually burst out laughing when asked about anti-Semitism. Let's take a look.
Oftentimes, things that you might say might not hold the weight for you, but to someone else, right? The way that and consume information is very different than how the next person might. So you don't regret your words either? I do not. Would you like people to? I never really want them to. That you were not anti-Semitic? Oh, certainly not. Yes. Would you like to make that clear? Yes. I mean, and that nothing I least to me was meant for that purpose.
Well, at least to me. Yes, no, anti-Semitism, it's no laughing matter. Neither is the way Americans talk about those that killed 3,000 of our fellow Americans on 9/11, or the terrorist Hezbollah. Congresswoman Omar finds apparently all that to be somewhat humorous and funny, as we have previously played on this program. Now, her behavior, obvious beliefs are pretty vile, pretty sickening. Omar now plans to introduce a resolution declaring her support for the anti-Semitic BDS boycott Israel. And Omar and other members of her squad are now the perfect representation of today's two-faced Democratic Party, built on select feigned moral outrage. Each week they call Trump, other Republicans, racist, sexist. You know the routine. Yet no outrage over Omar, anti-Semitism, no concern, no work in Farrakhan's paper. Meanwhile, Democrat Ralph Northam, you know, the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, apparently sleeping peacefully in the governor's mansion after his fellow Democrats didn't really seem to care that he dressed in a Ku Klux Klan outfit. Wonder if Tom would react. 2020 Democrats are busy kissing the ring of the Reverend Al Sharpton, who became well known for anti-Semitic, bigoted language. We played a lot of it last night. Hillary Clinton's mentor. She said her mentor, Robert Byrd, Ku Klux Klan. Al Gore's father tried to block the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That nation. Lyndon Johnson relied on Republican support to get it. It's the Democrat filibuster. The list goes on. We don't even have time to list all of creepy, crazy, sleepy Uncle Joe's racist remarks and policies over the years. Let's talk about charges of sexual misconduct. Again, selective, feigned moral outrage. Only when it's a Republican or Donald Trump supporter or Donald Trump appointee. Remember the I Believers in the Kavanaugh hearings? Well, they're nowhere to be found when a Democrat is accused of wrongdoing. Case in point, the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, King, interviewed, one accused him of rape, another said violent sexual assault, both telling people at the time he's still an offer a word from one of the I Believers. You got Keith Ellison, he got a promotion. Bill Clinton served 2 terms as president. What about the issue of Russia collusion? 2.5 years of conspiracy theories, lies, and a hoax? Hillary's bought and paid for dirty Russian dossier put together by a foreign spy with funneled money, Russian lies, as John Solomon will join us in a minute points out. Even the FBI knew 90+% of it was a lie. And now we also know that it was unverifiable because, of course, Christopher Steele never stood behind his own dossier. I don't have any idea if it's true. He said under oath, the media just spent months hyping phantom claims of obstruction against Trump. Did any of them ever talk about Hillary subpoenaed emails she deleted, fit to the hard drive, and asked 3,000 emails? And then, of course, meeting with hammers. Other than it be either MSDNC or fake news CNN go chamber in their whole daily freakout mode. Just know that it's more selective moral outrage. They don't really care about these issues. They only care about them if they can use them to bludgeon a Republican, a conservative, or Trump, or anybody that likes Trump. And nobody calls their bluff better than President Trump.
Of white nationalists. Whether it is happening in chat rooms or it's happening on national TV, and now it's reached the White House garden.
We remain focused on holding him accountable to the laws of this land and accountable to the American people.
He does not know how to defend his policies. So what he does is attack us personally.
We are more than 4 people. He ran on a man born to represent those ignored, left out, and left behind. Squad is big.
And there you've got 4 members of the 5 o'clock hour yesterday. You saw it live right here on the channel. Now you're looking live at Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, Republican. He's the Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution. We'll talk about some of the work you're going to do a little later today. But Senator, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Good to have you as well. How do you depict what we have seen in the last 36 hours? And the president, the Republicans, and Democrats, and Nancy Pelosi.
Well, it's been a little bit overheated. Some of it is these freshman members of Congress are radical and extreme. That they are embracing full. They are authoring the so-called Green New Deal, which would cost $93 trillion to the economy. That would have the effect of every family in America increasing your taxes $65,000 a year, every family in America. These are radical and extreme plans. These freshmen, unfortunately, also have a long and troubling history with anti-Semitism, engaging over and over again, not just once, but multiple times in making anti-Semitic insults, sending tweets. In fact, it was so bad that the House Democrats tried to censure those House freshmen for their anti-Semitic comments. They tried to pass a resolution condemning anti-Semitism in response to the comments. And it is a testament to the power in the Democratic Party those House freshmen have that the entire party, they couldn't hold the votes to pass a simple, clean resolution condemning anti-Semitism. I will tell you, I was proud that the Senate did a lot better. I authored a straightforward, direct resolution condemning anti-Semitism. Tim Kaine, a Democrat, two of us brought 6 co-sponsors, including 14 Democrats, and we passed it unanimously through the U.S. Senate. Every single Republican, every single Democrat. Right. And you want to know what the House should do in the wake of all this nonsense the last couple of days? They ought to take up and pass the resolution that the Senate just passed 100-0.
Why didn't they do it?
Because most of the conference is terrified of those freshmen, terrified of the radical activists behind them. Basically, the committee chairs has handed her gavel over to those freshmen. The committee chairs have handed their gavels over to the freshmen, and every one of them are terrified that these freshmen will criticize them. And what it means is the angry radicals. I mean, you saw they're accusing the president of being a white nationalist.
The speaker did criticize them, and in turn, they accused the speaker critical of that because they are people of color, and that's when the president inserted himself. So in the past, you and the president famously clashed, like Rand Paul, like Lindsey Graham, and you guys got over it, you respect each other. Lindsey Graham basically said the president is going to be coming from a new hire. Joni Ernst, Senator Tim Scott, kind of thought the president was over the line.
Like most tweets the president sends, I wouldn't send. But I'll tell you, the substance of their record is extreme, it's radical, and I think we ought to be talking about the substance of their record, the substance about why they send tweets minimizing 9/11 and minimizing Al Qaeda when they attacked America on 9/11. That's troubling when you're saying things like that.
Yeah, those say either. All right, let's talk
that
about.
is exactly right.
Let's talk about the Senate hearing about free speech today. You're holding this. I know you've invited Dennis Prager to come to Capitol Hill to talk about this because it really affects. What did we said earlier on our show?
If there's anything liberals and conservatives would agree on, and admittedly there isn't much, you would think it's about protecting free speech. And now today we have at PragerU, we have 1 billion views a year. We're very effective. And of our 320 5-minute videos, about 60 are on the restricted list. That means if you block pornography, you cannot see a discussion of Lincoln's address at Gettysburg. It's an absurdity if they say the algorithm. They created the algorithm. Let them give the algorithm to the public. This is how we ban videos. You can't even watch one of his videos. The history. If you have blocked pornography, if you're a parent and you've blocked pornography, and when we asked him why, and he said they hate us. They just don't videos.
You know, in George Orwell's famous book, 1984, the controlled its power, the way the state controlled its powers, it controlled information. So we're at war with Eurasia. We've always been at war with Eurasia. And if that changes, the information simply disappears. We see in the big tech media companies that same exact power. A couple of months ago, I chaired a hearing with Facebook and Twitter and the censorship that they're engaged in online, the political bias. Today, I'm chairing Google is a monopoly. Google may well be the most powerful company on the face of the monopoly, what you know and what I know. But not only that, but Google owns the second most popular website on the face of the planet. And they use these monopoly powers to silence voices they don't like. Listen, Dennis Prager is a brilliant.
So do you know what you're going to do with these tech companies? Do you know where does Ted Cruz stand? Because you're a free enterprise guy. Sure. Google wants to be the best. They do have a huge stake in our economy. Where do you stand?
It is a great question, and I will readily concede the solution is complicated. Nobody wants to see a federal speech police deciding what is and isn't permissible. What we do, however, have is 3 possible remedies. Number 1, there's a special provision of law, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, that gives Google and Facebook and Twitter companies a special immunity from liability that nobody else enjoys. And Congress passed that under the assumption they would be neutral public for. In other words, they weren't going to be biased, they weren't going to favor one view or another, they would let all comers come to their site. They've decided not to do that. They've decided to be hardcore leftists, to silence, to throttle, to shadow ban conservatives. And I think if they continue to do that, there's no reason they should get a special immunity from liability that nobody else does. Number 2 is the antitrust laws. Listen, by any measure, Google is larger, it is more powerful, it has a larger market cap than AT&T was when it was broken up by laws. It's larger and more powerful than Standard Oil was when it was broken up by the antitrust laws. Google is a monopoly, and Google is abusing its monopoly powers. We have antitrust laws to deal with that. And third, the Department of Justice can and should be investigating along the lines of fraud and or breach of contract, which is, look, when you sign up, say, with a Facebook or Twitter, you assume that if you follow someone, you'll see their tweets, you'll see their posts. Likewise, you assume if someone follows you, they'll see what you tweet and what you post. That's not in fact what's happening. What's happening is the social media sites are censoring, shadow banning. If they don't like what you're saying, they just hide what you're saying. actually a fraud on the consumer and they're deceiving the consumer because they've got a political agenda. Any of those three remedies needs to be considered, and I think the scope of this problem needs to be fully understood.
The big tech companies know those are things that could happen to them, so it'll be interesting to see what they tell you as subcommittee. So thank you very much. Good luck today.
Thanks.
Always a pleasure.
Now, this was very exciting. In case you haven't heard, Hunger Games starlet Jennifer Lawrence made a big announcement yesterday.
I'm going to be working with this organization I'm part of, Represent Us. It's just trying to get young people engaged politically, on a local level. It doesn't have anything to do with partisan. It's just anti-corruption stuff, trying to pass state-by-state laws that can help prevent corruption, fix our democracy.
That's all. Wow. Well, we also learned today that actor George Clooney is donating $500